It's the lens, it's the lens, it's the lens, gotta live diverse. It's the lens, it's the lens, it's the lens, live diverse. You are listening to The Lens Living Diverse, a podcast brought to you by the CNIB advocacy team. Join Neisha, Vivi, and I as we speak to individuals with intersecting identities who live with sight loss as they share their unique stories. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Lens, a special Black History Month edition. I am one of your hosts, Ben, joined with my wonderful, amazing co-host, Neisha.
Hi, everyone.
And my other amazing co-host, Vivi.
Hello, everyone.
As you folks know, it's February, and it gives us the opportunity to celebrate this special month, looking back at Black History Month and the contributions of Black figures to remind us where we have came from and now where we are in the present. So we're going to have a wonderful discussion today, a very candid discussion between the three of us. Okay, so I'm going to ask the first question. How do you feel about Black History Month? And what are your opinions about the designated month?
I feel that it's important to commemorate and celebrate Black history. I think, though, that the celebrations and the commemorations should be longer than a month. The month-long designation, it's a good thing in the regard that it kind of causes all to be conscious within that time period. However, I would like to see Black history and the study and the celebration of Black history and Black historical figures and what that's meant to Canadian identity extend throughout the year as we do with the recognition of other cultures that we are beginning to see the importance of in the Canadian context.
Yeah, I agree with Vivi. It's not enough that we celebrate it in the shortest month of the year. It also happens to be the coldest month of the year as well. And it makes it very challenging to get out there and do things because you never know, especially living in Toronto with the weather. And I'm sure Vivi and your
Yes,
what it will
in Manitoba,
be like.
the weather is an ever-changing thing. So the motivation and the energy sometimes to take part and to participate in community events can very much be affected by the weather. And when it's something so important that is, a little sad and could be discouraging that, such a big factor like weather impedes people from taking part. But I mean, it's the reality in the country that we live in. So,
right.
Even Neisha, you brought up a point that's very interesting, and I never even realized it with weather. And I'm thinking to myself, here we have Black history. Our descendants are from Africa, the Caribbean. That's the motherland, like I always say in the episodes. And you're thinking that, Black history, this should be during the spring or the summer, so we could actually like truly celebrate the festivals and the foods. And while we're delving into our history, we could have that celebration. So that's actually a really good point that I never thought of, especially when thinking about this episode. I definitely echo the sentiment of what yourself, Vivi, and yourself, Neisha, are saying. I also feel that to myself, especially growing up, Black history is so new, Black History Month. So I know in previous curriculums, when I was going up to school, it was never a Black History Month. It was seldomly mentioned where, oh, it's February, let's start all these events in Black History Month and do all these activities for us to learn about the past. And it probably in the last 10, I'd say 10, 12 years, 10, 15 years, that's when it was truly mentioned. So this is almost foreign to me. I always associated it with American events. So it's very it's different that it's so prevalent now, and it's mentioned throughout organizations and companies and all over TV, and yeah, it's definitely changed. Do you guys have any thoughts about that at
Well,
all?
growing up for me, Ben, I did remember learning about Black History Month in school, but we never dove deep into, Sojourner Truth or Frederick Douglass or Marcus Garvey. Like they stayed away from those figures who were a bit more controversial. And instead, I found a lot of the time I was learning about celebrities, like Whitney Houston and Patti LaBelle and Denzel Washington. I was learning about, their contributions in film and music. And they're wonderful people, don't get me wrong, but the deep history, like slavery, I found that teachers, and especially in high school, they didn't really dive deep into what Black people experienced during that time. It wasn't until after I left high school and on my own as an adult, that I, discover more of what we experienced. So it's kind of a watered down Black history, unfortunately, for me in my youth.
It was, mentioned and noted, but I think it was more of a passing thing, like February's Black History Month. But there wasn't really any marker or activity or commemoration that I can remember in school growing up. And it wasn't until I went to university and consciously started taking courses like African American literature, and then started doing literary study on my own, reading and researching about diaspora and the African American experience of slavery, that I became much more informed. And again, like you're saying, it was more in an American context than a Canadian one.
It was always, oh, in America, they were slaves and they were treated badly. And then they came to Canada and they were free and all was good. And Black people were free here and they had no problems. And that's kind of
that's kind of what I remember from high school. Yeah,
Mhm.
pretty much that America was bad, to be like really basic about it. America was bad, Canada was good. Yeah, when they came up through the Underground Railroad, it was all fine, which we now know was not the case.
Yeah, and it's very interesting because we're mentioning elementary and high school, and the fact that you learned more about Black history, overall Black history, when you were doing post-secondary studies. And I have a very, I would say, funny story where when I was in elementary school and high school, I went to high school in Oakville, Ontario, and that's the suburbs, just outside of Toronto in the GTA. And I don't even want to admit this on the podcast, but it was almost pathetic with the Black history I was knowledgeable about, because just like you two are saying, I knew about all the people in the States, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, celebrities. And I remember taking a class at Ryerson University, known as what is it, MTU now? Metropolitan Toronto University.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was themes of Black history. And I took this class as a bridge from college to university. I needed to take electives. So I remember going into that class being like, "Oh, I'm African. I know everything. I'm African background, West African. My parents always tell me these stories that I will excel so well in this class." And I remember sitting in this class and be like, "Wow, I knew nothing about anything." Like, we're talking about the apartheid and the Zulus and all these historic figures that range from Africa, and I felt embarrassed because I was like, no one taught me this. I did not know any of this, like, especially being a black male from Ghanaian descent. So it showed me that, were they really teaching appropriate, like, history, Black history? And here's a Black kid who didn't even know his own history and history that surrounded myself. So I don't know. It was almost like, yo, this is pathetic. This is sad.
I wish I had taken a course like that. As you're talking, I'm like, how do I do that now?
Definitely sign up for sure. And actually, they had Caribbean studies as well. And
Oh,
Ooh, that would have
yeah,
been cool.
yeah.
that would
What
have been so cool.
you guys are
Yeah.
acting like you can't go back to school for continue
Oh
education.
yes.
No, we
School
can.
school is always there. Yeah.
I
Um,
love learning.
me too.
Yes.
Me
So
too.
it is important. And I guess I shared about my experience with my curriculum growing up. You both shared briefly on your experiences with Black history curriculum in your environment. So would you both like to share like your environment, our Black history back in the day, elementary school, high school?
Well, it's interesting, Ben, that growing up in an area of Toronto that maybe didn't have too many Black folks for yourself. I grew up in an area in Toronto where it was predominantly Black and predominantly Caribbean or African descent. And Black history was still pretty much non-existent in the curriculum. And like I was saying earlier, it was, the US was bad, like Vivi said, and Canada was good, and slaves were happy, and that they were no longer slaves, they were free, and they had rights like everyone else. So, it wasn't until I think I was the last OAC class, so grade 13, I think it was grade 12, where we actually established in my high school a Black Students Association. And we went down to Chatham, Ontario, and we actually got to learn more about what Black people experienced coming in from the Underground Railroad. And there was nothing that was taught in school. We had to actually do this on our own. We had to fundraise on our own. We had to plan on our own. Our school board, our high school itself did not help us organize this trip. And what I got from that was going forward, even if for myself, and if I ever have children, it will be up to me to ensure that they know what it is they need to know about their history. Because unfortunately, our school systems are not going to teach our children or ourselves what it is that we need to know. We have to do it ourselves. And no one here is talking about a Black history class or an African studies or Caribbean class outside of what you mentioned in university. Like, where are these classes in elementary school and high school? Lately in the news, you're hearing that there will be a First Nations course being taught in some elementary schools in the coming years, but no one's talking about a Black studies course being taught to our children. So, our history is meant to tell us where we have been, where we're going, but what history is actually showing us is that nothing is changing, and our future is still up to us in order to ensure that those coming after us are well informed and well aware, because no one else is going to teach.
Yeah, and I agree with you completely. As I say, like my recollections of Black history and Black history education in elementary and high school are like very vague and very minimal or in passing. I mean, I remember in my education being one of like a small handful of either Black or brown kids. So it wasn't something that was emphasized or even dwelt upon to my recollection. And yeah, like most of my education about Black history came in post-secondary or the things my family was reading that, helped get me interested in African American literature and kind of drive that to see, like this is the other part of my history, this is the other part of my heritage, as part of the Caribbean diaspora. So yeah, I agree. And that leads me back to my initial statement, right? Like that it shouldn't just be relegated to a month. This is also part of Canada's complicated, sordid, sometimes tragic history. So it should also be embedded and included in the curriculum that we teach, the good, the bad, all of it contributes to who and what we are as a country. So it should be included and not necessarily designated to 1 month out of the year, because we don't stop being Black after February 28th,
Yeah.
right? Like it's a lived experience, and so it should be woven into the fabric of Canadian history, I think.
I totally agree, and I love that suggestion. What you're saying, Nisha, with producing content for Black history within the school system, and I almost feel like I know the curriculum is stuffed. Like the curriculum is definitely stuffed with so many different aspects, but the one thing, and I still, as we're talking, it makes me rewind all the way to like grade 8 history and being so bored. Sitting in history class and being so extremely bored. And why is it not that there could be different sections and different units? So, okay, we have Canadian history, we have Black history, we have Indigenous history, we have world history. And just it makes me think back on just the focus of European history. And I almost feel like I knew more about European history and and just everything except that Indigenous and Black history. And even when it was those stories, it would be these narratives that, oh, like Christopher Columbus did such a good job, or like Pearl Harbor. And I know
American explorer.
exactly, and I know we're getting a little controversial, but no, that's what it's all
Okay.
about, right? These are our opinions, by the way. And I think it's so important to break up these units and provide equal, because we're all looking for equality and inclusivity, to break up these units and have these taught properly as well.
Or you need to take it both and, right? Like, of course, yeah, I think when we were all in school, it was very much the colonial lens, right? Like you're saying, but
Yes.
the explorer, there was contact. These are all the alleged great things that exploration did. These are all the alleged great impacts that colonizers had upon the people who had already inhabited the land that was already theirs, that was already colonized. I mean, I think we need to portray a balanced, if at all possible, depiction of history. Like, yeah, this was colonialism. This was the impact of the colonizer, and then the response from the other side. Like, we need the history from the colonized. Um, that response, like you're saying, the indigenous response, the African Canadian, African American response to colonization. And I think that's what we get now in post-secondary. But like Neisha's saying, we need to have that more shared in elementary and high school, so that there's a more well-rounded depiction of history and how that looks from everyone involved and everyone affected.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. And I almost feel like we could branch off another episode just talking about like history and colonization for sure. So our resident historian Vivi will definitely lead that episode, because I just admitted on air I was falling asleep during history class back in the day. So I and I feel that, and I gave an example on when I was younger, how I felt like I didn't know enough about Black history, and definitely I'm gonna ask, and I feel like this is kind of a close-ended question, but like, do you folks feel that you're more educated now? How do you feel about kind of that knowledge about Black history and the figures of Black history?
Well, I feel educated because of the university courses that I took, and I read the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass, and I read incidents in the life of a slave girl. I read Beloved and the historical documents that novel was based on. So, I mean, I kind of, made myself learn this past and this history. So I do feel I'm well informed because of my university education. But I mean, there's always more to learn.
Exactly. And yeah, it's definitely very interesting to, and I like that vulnerability from all of us here, where we're not professional. Like we could easily just be like, yeah, I know everything about Black history, and I'm a professional, and I'm a historian. But you know what? That's why even what Neisha made mention, it's ongoing learning. It's ongoing
Yep.
learning, and it's worth it for sure.
Well, there's different histories too, right? Like it doesn't necessarily have to be names and dates. Like there's different ways you can explore learning your history. Like I love to read, so I prefer to get my history lessons from books and through narratives and through literature like that. But I mean, you can investigate the history of hip hop or the history of Caribbean cooking or the history of um, you know, quilt making. There's so many histories that aren't found in books that are so valid in other ways of archiving and making records that are still important to the preservation of culture, that it doesn't necessarily have to come from a book and sitting in a class.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
Totally agree. So even with that said, for the knowledge that we have right now, and because it is Black History Month, and we're gonna go on record, it's Black History Year.
That's right.
It's a Black History lifetime learning, but just to educate those who are listening and want to learn a little bit more about Black figures and who we look up to, or what figures that we know of. Is there any Black figures, dead or alive, that you want to kind of give a shout out to on the podcast, especially when we're looking back at Black History Month?
Josephine Baker, look her up.
Hey, okay. Now I'm curious. You got to give me a little bit, but I definitely look her up for sure.
Okay, well, she was an actress, and I forget which decade. See, this is why I take in my history in other forms rather than names or dates.
Yeah.
She wasn't really successful in America as an African American actress. She went to France. She made a career. She was a spy during World War II. She was friends with Grace Kelly. She had like a menagerie of animals. Yeah, she was amazing.
I don't really have a favorite. I love all Black historians, historical figures, good and bad.
Is there no, not trying to be like, yeah, you're beating around the bush. Is there anybody just kind of comes to mind?
There's two that comes to mind. So the first is Madam C.J. Walker, and don't just go watch the Netflix starring Octavia Spence, which is great. She's another history, what you call it, monumental figure in Black history, current Black history. But Madam C.J. Walker, first Black millionaire for something all Black women love, hair care. She went with her own hair care line and system of products, and yeah, really did her thing back in the day. And I'm gonna say Malcolm X, and like many people in my age group, they remember seeing Denzel Washington as Malcolm X in X. And for the longest time, like he did such a good job in that movie. Like I thought he was Malcolm X because it was just an amazing portrayal. And he too is just an amazing representation of our community. But just the things that he stood for, and his beliefs, and how he revolutionized a time in history. Whether you agree with the teachings of the Nation of Islam or you don't, you you can't disagree with the man that Malcolm X was and what he managed to do as just one Black man during that time frame, and how he mobilized an entire religious organization. So yeah, I'll stop there because this episode's getting a little controversial.
Controversy is good.
Man,
It keeps
Neisha
us
stirring up the
talking.
pots.
Keeps the
Neisha is
dialogue going.
Neisha is stirring up the
Not
pot
shy
and
away from controversy.
the
Yeah.
lens living diverse. I mean,
Mhm.
yeah, but no, really great individuals, and even like Nisha and Vivi alluded to, it's just so many, and everybody's always making history. I'm just gonna say things that ones that pop out of my head. Definitely John Ware. And I this pops out of my head, and I really like this one because no one associates like a black cowboy. You know what I mean? And everybody's always thinking like, oh, like you have all these cowboys. Black people had nothing to do with herding and with anything to do with those days. But like you have someone like a John Ware who I believe he went through Calgary, and he was a herder, and he owned his own ranch. And it's just like, whoa, like seeing that definitely shakes up everything when we do think about Black people. And uh, someone like Elijah McCoy, who was an inventor. And when we look at, I guess, discrimination, and we look at prejudice, and we look at what you call like white supremacy, you have here where it's a belief about Black people, where Black people did not contribute to society. And then you have this inventor where you wouldn't even be able to go on a train without this inventor, or
Mhm.
uh, like things wouldn't even be prevalent. Like even the individual, and I have to remember his name, the individual who invented the stoplight was a Black individual. And you have these beliefs that, oh, I'm like, wow, like I have this mindset of supremacy. And like I said, half of these things wouldn't be here if it wasn't for these inventors. So I feel like it's very important. You have and Vivi,
My
your
alter
new name,
ego, Viva.
your new alter ego for the lens, Viva.
Yeah.
So you have like classical music individuals like what Portia White, and then who's that other gentleman? He was a
Oh,
classical pianist.
now you're putting me on the spot.
Putting you on spot, but definitely see this provides the listeners to search. Uh, so you have all these individuals like, and then you have Marianne Shad, who was a journalist. And the one thing I love about revisiting this history is not putting Black people in boxes
Mhm.
and thinking that we just made our history off of entertainers or sports or fashion or anything else. It's a vast look at our history and what we are becoming, and how we shouldn't be put in boxes on what Black people can do.
You know what worries me, Ben, is as you're talking about it, I was thinking about something a good friend of mine told me the other day. She has two small children who are in elementary school in Toronto. And this was last Black History Month. I should ask her about this year. But last year, her son came home and he was given a list of Black historical, I'm using air quotes, historical figures, and to pick one to write a paper on. And on that list was Drake, LeBron James, Lil Wayne, uh, a couple of other basketball and baseball players, and that was considered to be Black history. And and she was so upset. She wrote the teacher an email saying that my son will pick from a list that she had and will present to the class. And that's what worries me. Like this is our future, right? And that we're talking about. And yeah, we're having this wonderful conversation about what we hope Black history will become. But right now we're seeing that our generation now might not be getting what it is that they need in order for their lives to be different than ours when it comes to how they learn Black history.
And part of me wonders if that was not an attempt to like make Black history relevant, because I would like, people will say, well, slavery was 400 years ago, right? Like, why should we care about it now? Which we still should. But I mean,
Yeah.
the argument is there is because it happened, because it existed. So I'm wondering, yeah, that was the attempt to kind of make Black history relevant to a younger generation. But to your point, Neisha, like we still need to look further back to, how this all came to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Noah and I had a conversation with friends as well about the focus of even what do they say, Black success, right? And I believe because you have entertainers, you have sports stars, they're in the forefront. And just like with anything, like when you're a celebrity, that's success, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what people are all thinking. Everybody wants to be this, this, and this. But and not to even knock on people who are hip hop artists and basketball players because their hustle, that's a huge hustle. Or entertainers, right? That's still very huge. But I believe the mistake that has been made is we have to look at people who are in the background, right?
Mhm.
And we can't just totally uh, put people in boxes where this is what Black people have to do. We have to give people options where, like, if you want to be a CEO, a Black CEO, if you want to be, own your own business, if you want to be a historian, a playwright, you know what I mean? And I think that's the biggest problem, especially what was happening with that situation. And I'm going to go into the next question. And I feel that's so important because we're all on this earth with people who are different, right? So that brings up our favorite word, allyship. And I know me, Vivi, and Kat on previous episodes, we want to change it to supporters. What was it, Vivi? Supporters?
Yeah, I think so. I think it was supporters.
Yeah, supporters. So we might ban that word, allyship. Maybe we might bleep it out. So the beautiful thing about being a supporter is the fact that just like the word, you're able to support a community that you might not be a part of. What is your perspective on being a supporter in terms of delivering Black History Month? So I know we had a discussion between us three and probably with other people where when it's Black History Month events going on, people like to turn to Black people in organizing the events and coordinating it. So your experiences and your thoughts about that.
I really think that supporters, I like that you changed the word, supporters, should really do their own work in terms of reading about what Black history has been, um, knowing, the different historians, influencers, monumental figures, and not just rely on us as Black people to educate them or to tell them what they need to know. Take the time for yourself and, do the research, do the work, show that you're interested, show that you want to know, and you don't just want to know because it's Black History Month, and then after February 28th, you're done. But also when you're in the space of planning and programming for events, don't just rely on Black people to do the Black history events. You could come to us to make sure you're on the right track or to help. But don't feel it should be on us. I know that, people outside of our community are nervous. They're like, well, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to, offend anybody. And I really appreciate that. I really appreciate that empathy and compassion. But still, in order for us to grow and for things to change, you really have to take some leadership and, plan things that will be appropriate and that will get the kind of positive response that is needed during this time.
Yeah, I agree. And I think there's a delicate balance with asking questions, like relying on the Black person in your community to be the know all and end all for all answers, because of course everybody is different, and what works or what is right for one Black person may not work or be right for another Black person. So I think there should be discretion in asking questions and seeking advice. And of course, if you don't know, ask. But again, yeah, you can take initiative to educate yourself. There are lots of resources out there, and don't expect, one Black person to be the keeper of all knowledge about all things Black history.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. I definitely agree with both. And I I'm a firm believer about consultation for sure. And just like we're saying, not everything's in a book. Definitely this be, and I don't want to make this sound contradictory to what Vivi's saying and asking a Black person, but then at the same time, there's always people who are willing to share, right? Always people who are willing to guide and make that a collaboration for sure, instead of just putting it on just a single person. Hey, we have a Black person who works at this organization, they could plan it. And I think it's very important. And what I believe as a human being, I'm starting to learn as a supporter as well, where if I'm a true supporter, I'm there to collaborate. I'm there for the community who is trying to get the trying to get that information across. I'm there for them. So I would definitely like the same respect when it does come to Black history, where I don't have someone talking for me and I don't have someone putting their ideas for myself or the community, but collaborating and getting that true information, the true authentic information.
Exactly. And as a supporter, like the simplest question you can ask is sometimes the most profound. If you don't know, perfect opportunity to say, in what way can I support you in this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's what it is, and that's why we use the word supporters, because it's that support. It's to make a fellow individual stronger. So it's so important. So I definitely, with organizations or even just friends, just kind of having that kind of that respect as well. So we are rounding up this episode, very profound episode and very thought-provoking. I came in here thinking, yeah, I'm talking about Black history, but so much wealth of information by yourself, Vivi and Neisha. Just kind of going into our last question, just your last thoughts, and we touched upon this a little bit. Your last thoughts about Black History Month within organizations that you've been a part of in the past, or just even in general, like putting that awareness about Black History Month.
What's interesting is that, and I'm thinking about my previous work experiences, and I don't really think, and this is on me as well, but I didn't feel that it was a safe space in order to bring up what are we doing for Black history. So I didn't bring it up. But now in the position that I'm in, I feel like I have the support. The position I'm in with my organization, I feel like I have the support I have from both my colleagues and management to do things internally and externally for both staff and for participants, and not just during Black History Month, but year round, which is great. Like making positive change to show, like what Vivi had said earlier, it should be 365 days and not just from February 1st to February 28th. So I'll stick with, how I'm experiencing things now, that they're, it's a positive thing. And yeah, I'm grateful for the support that I have moving forward.
And I would say it's great that our organization acknowledges it and draws attention to it and encourages us to celebrate it, and often provides resources for, ways you can do your history research, acknowledge and celebrate. I also appreciate that, idea, the D in idea is diversity, is part of our workplace culture, and there is an emphasis on, incorporating that into our daily operations and our organizational function and our service delivery. And like Neisha alluded to, even among our colleagues, like spreading that awareness and support and having the opportunity to go beyond just a month and incorporate it into the workplace atmosphere. I feel really appreciative that we get to do that and that it is supported in our workplace.
So even at the beginning of this episode, we're talking about curriculum and we're talking about when we were younger, it wasn't as publicized. So it does warm my heart, the fact that it is being spoken about and the fact that we are bleeding through February and making it all year round, or attempting to make it all year round. And I just feel like in my stance, I was thinking about it a little bit earlier about Black History Month, because I used to think, I was just like, it's just a month. But the one thing that is a silver lining, I look at it as someone's birthday, right? So you have someone's birthday where you know the person 365 days a year, but when their birthday comes around, you give them that extra attention and that extra special sauce and making them feel appreciated that day. So when I think about Black History Month, I feel that it's someone's birthday. We're giving it that extra sauce for that month, but we still appreciate the historical figures and what Black individuals are contributing 365 days a year, but just that extra sauce in February, right? So I hope that's a perspective that people can look at. And I hope that maybe 2 months of Black History Month or 3 months, or just all the time, celebration all the time. And as a Black person, I will definitely push for the history and then push for that as well. So that's kind of my perspective and my outlook on it. And today's episode of The Lens, I just love it because we're getting authentic, transparent opinions. And I just want to say before we sign off that, hey, I'm standing with two people who are part of Black history and making a big impact as well in the present, for sure.
So nice, Ben.
Yeah, so are you, Ben.
Exactly.
Yeah,
You're making history with this podcast.
Exactly. I was just gonna say that is what the lens is doing. History in the making.
Exactly. I gotta earn it, but but know what? I just want to thank you both for having this discussion and for even the listeners. And I hope that the listeners have taken away a lot from this conversation. I just want to thank everybody for listening to today's episode of The Lens Living Diverse. Very meaningful episode for meaningful discussions. I almost feel that this should trigger some discussions as well. And if you want to listen to any previous episodes, you can listen to it on any platform, including YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, iTunes, and wherever you get your podcasts. Also, if you want to learn more about D&I, you could visit the CNIB webpage, advocacy, and then click on We Are CNIB. Once again, advocacy, We Are CNIB. Or if you have any feedback or if you want to be a part of any episode with The Lens Living Diverse, email advocacy@cnib.ca. Once again, advocacy@cnib.ca. So we are going to sign off this very special episode. I was one of your hosts, Ben, joined by my co-host, Vivi.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.
And my other fellow amazing co-host, Neisha.
Bye, everyone. Happy Black History Month. See you next time.
Happy Black History Month.